Welcome to the Michael Blum Show, where we talk about things you don't want to talk about. We talk about sex. We talk about politics. We talk spirituality and substance abuse. Join us by calling 800-699-0980. Think, speak, and be heard. Here now is Michael Blum.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Michael Blum Show. We have a good show scheduled tonight. I hope everyone is with us. I'd like you to give me a call, and the number here again to reach us is 800-699-0980. Again, 800-699-0980. We're going to have a guest a little bit later on in the show, so that will be very good. And when I say later on, I mean in a couple of minutes. I just wanted to go ahead and again introduce myself. We usually talk about things most people don't want to talk about. We do politics, we do sex, we do all sorts of good stuff on this show. Please mark it. We're going to try to do this every Tuesday at 8 p.m. I'm updating some software, and some things are working and some things are not right now, but I intend on having a good show, and I'm recording this so I can post this after the fact if need be. And again, give us a call, 800-699-0980. There's a lot of stuff in the news we could talk about. To be quite honest, sometimes politics just bores the crap out of me because it's the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. You have the party of hate, a party that basically their platform is let's hate Trump. I mean, I think that the Trump won the Democratic debate, quite honestly, because I can't imagine anyone really voting Democratic. But obviously there are a bunch of them out there that will and do that. I just don't share the thought. I have an issue with that because I do like to be reasonable. I do like to go ahead and connect with people. I do like to go ahead and see another point of view, and I do like to compromise from time to time. But sometimes the differences are just so stark and ridiculous that there's no place that I can even see where I could compromise on things. It's do you want a country? Do you not want a country? Do you want to have a border? Do you not want to have a border? Some things are like really ridiculous to try to compensate for, but they can't be done. So I see the Democrat. And by the way, I was a Democrat at one point in time, way back when. Last Democrat I voted for, though, was Carter. Carter, I think, is very pissed right now at Trump because Carter's claim to fame, obviously, is that he was the worst president ever, and Obama kind of took that away from him. So I have a feeling that now he's, kind of upset with that. He doesn't have that worldview anymore where he is actually the worst. There's someone who he may believe is worse than him. And that's kind of frightening and scary, but it is how it is. Ross Perot passed away today. I voted for him back in the 90s. My name is Ross and you're the boss. And he was the only one who really got NAFTA right. I can remember it almost like it was today, where he said, if NAFTA is passed, you will hear the sucking sound of a vacuum formed by companies leaving the United States. And boy, was he right. He really was right. There was a batch of companies that left at that point in time. So that's in the news today. I'm wondering what Europe and Iran are going to be doing. I don't know. I think Europe will probably just pay lip service, but I'm not sure. And then you have the whole Epstein thing. And now you have Schumer and Pelosi calling for the resignation of Acosta, who is Secretary of Labor. And they can't understand how something like this can happen. Let me refresh your memories. Jeff Epstein ran junkets all the time. And of course, this is all for helping people out. Of course, his passion for 12-year-old girls was pretty well known to everyone and anyone who was aboard that ship. And they went to his paradise island, and among the people who went at the time was Bill Clinton. Guess, isn't that something? Bill Clinton went. And of course, this is all for charity and whatever other nonsense you have to write down on paper to go ahead and get a tax deduction and make it look like you're not there just to get your rocks off with underage girls. And because of Clinton's involvement, his wife really didn't like that too much. And so he got a really good deal out of the Democrats that ran the show down in Miami, and people seem to have forgotten that. Somehow that's skipped their mind, and it's Trump's problem, of course, because everything is Trump's problem, from the weather to the fact that you have a hurricane to you name it. I mean, I had trouble streaming here with a Facebook stream, and I think it's Trump's fault. Quite honestly, I think it's him. I think it's him. But enough. I pontificate a bit too much. I want to go ahead and get our guest on the phone and see if we can go ahead and start a more sensible conversation. So let's see.
The number you have dialed is invalid or not in service.
Really?
Please check the number and dial again. Message 3002.
Nope. That's interesting. He just gave it to me. 20. I'm not going to announce it. I can't do that, can I? But let me see if I have it right, and then I'll call him on another line, and we'll be good. Not me. This one. Try it one more time.
The number you have dialed is...
All right, we're going to call the other number then, and that'll be that.
The number you have dialed is invalid or not in service. Please check the number and dial again. Message 3002.
All right, well, they both can't be like that, so let's do this instead.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing, Michael?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
I'm doing great. I wanted to make sure you can hear me pretty well. You can hear me? I'm all right?
I can hear you just fine.
All right, excellent, excellent. Well, welcome to the show. I'm glad to have you aboard here. I want to make sure, well, I'll have to do this off the air. I called the other number up first, and the one that ends in a 40, and it said the number was not active. I'm not sure if that's the phone system or what's going on, but anyway, it's a pleasure to have you on here. By the way, folks, Michael Hart, he runs a show, a very good one actually, on the radio. He's been doing this for quite a while. He is a history buff, and if you want more information, you should actually go to michaelhartshow.com. He presents a very fast, lively paced show, and it's based on very, very provocative stuff about history. Do I have that right? Is that pretty much how it is?
Yeah, you know, the program that we do, Michael, is based around the fact that almost everything in the American news cycle has been influenced by history and beliefs, and a lot of that history, quite frankly, is just inaccurate. So our theme of the program is breaking down the news of the day through the prism of the past.
Excellent way of putting it. The prism of the past. Is there one thing in particular that you think is so that America really has gotten so wrong with history it really needs to be adjudicated in some way?
Well, you know, we've come off the Independence Day holiday, and there's been so many things just even wrapped around that. For example, July 4th is not really our Independence Day. It happened on July 2nd. We know that because of a letter that was written to Abigail Adams by John Adams, and that seems like a trivial thing to say, but then again, you know, we also know that John Hancock signed a blank piece of paper. He didn't actually sign the Declaration of Independence. The Declaration of Independence wasn't signed on July 4th. It was signed sometime beginning around the second day of August, going all the way up into late November. All the pictures that you see in the paintings of the Declaration of Independence being signed by a bunch of old white guys is completely historically inaccurate. A lot of them were younger. Thomas Jefferson, for example, was only 33 years of age. Some of them, the two of them for South Carolina, were even 26 and 27 years old, respectively. And although these might not be things that necessarily change the national narrative, people need to be aware that throughout the history of this country, the news media has either reported it wrong, gotten it wrong, or just disseminated information that was incorrect and eventually found its way into our history books.
So screw-ups with the media, that's not a new thing. That's a kind of historically how it goes.
Well, you know, Donald Trump refers to them, obviously, as fake news, fake media. But interestingly enough, the very first president to ever accuse the media of being fake was Thomas Jefferson. You know, almost every administration in this country's history has had some kind of a problem with the press. It's been a very adversarial relationship. And I'm not trying to imply here that the media necessarily intentionally gets it wrong, but the fact of the matter is they don't often vet the stories out that they report. They take them at face value. Another one is the story of Betsy Ross. We don't know if Betsy Ross sewed the first flag or not. We didn't even hear this story until her grandson, a guy by the name of William Canby, reported it for the first time in 1870. And the only proof that he had was affidavits from the family members at that time. Now, that sounds kind of trivial, but if you get into the story of Betsy Ross, you begin to realize it plays into the national narrative as it relates to the Betsy Ross flag and Colin Kaepernick and how wrong he is in his belief that it's a symbol of racism.
Yeah, well, that's Colin has his own little mind going on there, and who the hell knows what really is going on with it? It gets kind of odd, but neither here nor there with that. The flag has been for some reason the flag has become a problem. It seems all along because you have a lot of people that have a lot of concern about the Confederate flag. They feel that that's basically be akin to like waving around a Nazi flag or something like that. And I'm sure you know a little bit more of the history behind that than I do.
Well, the swastika is another example. The swastika is actually an Indian symbol for peace. And it was adopted many, many, many years ago by an army battalion that had a lot of Native Americans actually within their ranks. They didn't abandon the swastika itself until Hitler adopted it. This wasn't a German symbol. And so there's all these just narratives that people have in their mind about what's really going on. It's one of the reasons why we get comments from people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the concentration camps. Too many people in this country are simply not up to speed with history. But I also want to point out that we're not just talking about history from 100 or 200 years ago. We're talking about history, technically, we can say history happened an hour ago.
Sure.
And when you look at comments like, we have Barack Obama's comments that, the immigrants should not be coming here with their children. That was always said 3 or 4 years ago, talking about the dangers that the immigrants would face coming to America, across Central America. But people seem to omit that, and they forget that. So the past matters. And again, that's why we say we're breaking down the history of the day through the prism of the past.
It's strange that we do that. People realize that they are where they are because they happen to be here. If you're born into poverty, then you're a poor person. You're born into poverty. If you're born into wealth, you're born into wealth. I thoroughly disagree with the idea that everyone is equal. I don't think anyone is equal. I think the opposite. I think everyone is absolutely, completely, and totally different. The type of medical care that I can get is not going to be the same as what Trump can get. The types of lawyers I could handle is not going to be the same as Bezos. No one really is equal. The only type of equality maybe you get is under the law a little bit, but other than that, I don't really think it exists. I think that there are many, many misconceptions. Now, my misconceptions about things are a little bit more maybe theoretic, but you're talking about raw stuff out of history. For instance, I had a conversation with someone the other day, and we were just talking about Christmas. And I mentioned, well, if Christ actually was Jewish, then he followed the Jewish calendar. And on the Jewish lunar calendar, it's completely different than Gregorian. So his birthday could not be consecutively every single year on the 25th of December, because that it really just can't be. If that was what they were doing at that time, that they would change much more like how it happens with Easter, whereas Easter is based on the planets. It's the first Sunday after the solstice is Easter, and that changes every year. It's a different date, and that's pretty much what I was trying to convince this other gentleman I was speaking, and he got kind of irate and upset, and I don't know what his back of his mind thoughts were, but I'm sure they weren't really that good. But there are all sorts of things that actually, and I don't even know how that got started. Chris, do you know a lot about that, or anything about the Christmas, or any of the myths surrounding that?
Well, if you're talking about from a historical perspective, Christmas was actually not celebrated until the 19th century. It was celebrated in the 1800s. And when you look at comments like Barack Obama's comments that, the immigrants should not be coming here with their children, in America for the better part, and when I say America, I mean even dating back to the colonial days. It was Oliver Cromwell that actually outlawed the holiday in the new colonies, and it didn't become a holiday until the 1800s when the state of Alabama made it a legal banking holiday. It wasn't even a religious observation, and it was Oklahoma that became the very last state to make it a legal holiday in 1907, which was the year of their founding. But, Christmas, as you point out, is, extraordinarily misunderstood, and a lot of people don't realize that in the early days of America, it was primarily celebrated in the Deep South. Many people in the Pacific Northwest, to the degree that it was settled, as well as New England, didn't pay the holiday any attention. It didn't become a federal holiday until the late 1800s. So there's a lot of misconceptions about the legalistic aspect of the holiday, because I agree with you about the calendar. The North Star would not even have been in place in the sky in December at that point in time. So, you get into all these hair-splitting things with people that demand that everything that they've been taught in time, it will stand the test of time. And very oftentimes we find out that a narrative has been created just, by some special interest group or to advance an agenda or whatever the case may be. Because at the end of the day, if you're a Christian, then when the Lord was born is irrelevant, or at least it should be. But, for people that were observing the holiday, it wasn't legalized until Alabama did it in the mid-1800s.
It's amazing what people actually believe. And what's amazing to me also is like the level of how people celebrate things nowadays. How can I describe it? We just got done with 4th of July. I don't know if in 1778 they celebrated the 4th of July at all. And if they did, I don't know that they celebrated it by scalping an Indian or maybe having a barbecue. I mean, I just don't know. But I know over time things tend to get watered down. So a lot of people are walking around with false information about things that they're really adamant about. It's kind of reminds me of, and I'm going to sound like a partisan because I am, but it reminds me of the Democratic Party that tends to want to believe what it would like to believe when it would like to believe it. And it's a shame, I believe, that people think that way. Maybe it's a good thing. What do I know? It could be. Maybe it's a good thing to go ahead and keep on mutating your life as you move forward. I really don't know. So tell me a little bit. How did you get involved with history and in enjoying that and going ahead and writing a book, which we'll talk about?
Well, as you point out, I've been a talk radio host for the better part of about a decade and a half. And being in Alabama, we're very sensitive to racism and the civil rights movement and the struggles and things of that nature. Many of us in the Deep South, quite frankly, are kind of scoffing at some of the other debates that are going on throughout much of the rest of the country as it relates to civil rights. But with that said, I was putting together a program for the month of February, Black History Month. And this has been years and years ago. And in my research, I discovered that Rosa Parks was not the first woman to refuse to give up a bus seat in Montgomery, Alabama. It was actually a 15-year-old girl by the name of Claudette Colvin. Claudette was, she was very mouthy with the cops, and she was only 15 years old. She was thought to possibly be pregnant by a married white guy. The leadership in Montgomery wasn't having anything to do with that, so they bring in Rosa Parks, who worked as a secretary for the NAACP in Montgomery. She wasn't just a lowly seamstress. She was a political operative known to the local political machine. So anyway, I began to get in my investigation, so much so that I even interviewed Colvin. She's still alive. She lives in New York, and she's not happy about the fact that she's living in a one-bedroom apartment in New York, and Rosa Parks got statues on every street corner in the Deep South, in her honor. But that notwithstanding, that kind of set me on a path of, if that's not correct in history, and heck, I'm from Alabama, and I didn't even know this. Again, this has been 10 years ago. What else is wrong out there? So I just began to embark, and the book gets, the name of the book is Unknown America. It just doesn't get into history or politics. It gets into sports and religion and the military and just all the things in American history that people believe that just aren't true. And the neat thing about it, Michael, is that the truth is even more fascinating than what the history books portray.
That's crazy, isn't it? You wonder kind of what happened. How did this all kind of become? It sounds it's like a nasty snowball effect. It sounds like a little pebble that gets rolled down the hill, and then it becomes some kind of crazy story that everyone accepts. And that's fascinating. This woman you said, is she still alive and she lives in New York? Did you ever interview her? That would I don't know if she does that. That would be kind of crazy.
Well, I've talked to her on the phone, and she's been a little reluctant to give me an interview because she's pushing 90 years of age.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't hear really well, and she's kind of a time she's trying to put behind her. And, I actually Googled her. I went online and I researched and I talked to her, and I begged and pleaded with her. And she's like, every time I talk to her, it's only been a couple times, but every time I talk to her, it's like, Michael, I'll think about it. And then I call her back, and, the next time it's like, I'll think about it. And so we kind of go back and forth because she knows the stories out there. She's granted other interviews when she was younger, but as she's gotten older, I think she's just a bit reluctant. But, if people want to find out more about her, her name is Claudette Colvin.
That's amazing. That's amazing. What else has been in the news? There's been a lot of things in the news. You mentioned to me you like talking about the news. Ross Perot passed away.
Yes.
I don't know how many people voted for him, but I did actually way back when, and he got a lot of things right. I got to tell you, I remember him on TV as if it was yesterday, going, "Well, that NAFTA thing, if that gets in, you're going to hear the big vacuum caused by the sucking sound of companies leaving the United States." And boy, was he right. I think what got him done was he pulled out of the race and then went back into it, and I think he lost a lot of steam and wind with that. But that's a pretty. He was pretty entrepreneurial at the time, coming in. He's kind of like a pre-Trumper, if you will, I think, in thought at least, because just a unique guy coming out of business. I liked him. Looky here, my name's Ross, but you're the boss. I liked all that. I liked the kind of homey feel to different people.
Yeah, he was definitely refreshing. And your observation that he was a pre-Trumper was kind of it's very accurate because he was one of the very first ones to kind of tip that apple cart, and he was definitely a lot of fun to cover. He was one healthy one-liner after the other.
Yeah, he was pretty good. I like him with his charts he had up and all of that. Of course, today it would be all computer graphics, but he had his little charts and stuff like that. I thought a lot of that was really kind of cool. Talking about rewriting history, I was thinking of actually doing a segment on the show called The Asshole Report, and picking one or two things, either from news or from sports or wherever. But I have like a real big plethora of people I could pick from. I decided to go with AOC today because of her concentration camp comments down at the border. And the crazy thing to me was that Ilhan Omar backed her up. And her reason was, well, there are camps down there, and there's a concentration of people, so I guess they're concentration camps.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of people in the summer, July 4th or whatever, they send their kids to sleepaway camps. So I guess if you use her logic, because there are camps there and there's a concentration of children, these are concentration camps for children. Well,
Michael, you don't even want to get me started on the whole concentration camp thing. I actually broadcast from my home in Birmingham, Alabama, and my studio is up on the top floor of my home. In the basement directly below me is a table that belonged to my great-grandmother, and that table was actually smuggled out of Czechoslovakia when Hitler was moving in. Now, my entire family I was raised a Catholic, but I have, Jewish roots on my mother's side of the family as well. And I had a grandmother who had a sister who happened to have been a nun in Czechoslovakia in the 1930s. This table was in storage downstairs, and it was actually a family heirloom, obviously, smuggled out of Czechoslovakia as Hitler was sweeping through Poland, heading towards Czechoslovakia, and building concentration camps along the way. I had family members that would have been imprisoned in these concentration camps, not because they were Jewish, but because they were Catholic. And that's another thing that's lost in this whole AOC narrative of hers, is it wasn't just the Jews. He hated anybody that was Roman Catholic. He hated gays. A lot of people in these concentration camps, Michael, were German citizens themselves. The whole narrative is completely bastardized, And I even went so far the other day as saying this woman needs to step down because she is a threat to what people believe in this country because she is so diametrically opposed to reality.
Before I had you on, before I called you up, I was just mentioning how I don't mind being friendly. I don't mind compromise when something can be worked out. But the differences are just so vast. I don't know where there's a middle line anywhere. You either, if you have a country, then you have a border, and you have citizens and non-citizens. If your penchant is to say we no longer have a sovereign nation anymore, and basically everyone's a citizen of the world. This is all crap I've heard, when I was a kid, and that anyone can come here and anyone can get anything that they want. I don't know where the compromise could ever be. I just don't see it. And I would say if you pick just about every single thing that the new Socialist Communist Democratic Party believes in, I can't see a way to compromise on anything. My only hope is that mainstream media is blowing the left arm of the Democratic Party, supporting them so much that perhaps that's also kind of fake news, and many Democrats don't think that way. I wish if they didn't think that way, they would speak out about it, because it does seem like that whole party has fallen apart and is lost. I mean, it's like, I don't believe you should kill children. I mean, once they're born, I don't think you should then go, well, let's see, to decide, is this something I should have done or not done? I think it's a bit too late. I believe, I believe in responsibility. I think that everyone is where they are because of who they are and what they've done. I don't have the victim mentality. So it's hard for me to do any type of compromise or try to find some type of, there isn't any common ground to find. Do you agree with that, or am I off? So you do agree with that? Hello? Oh, are you there, Michael? I think I lost you. I don't know what happened here, but I'm going to try to give you a call back. Hold on, and let's see what we can do. Hello? I missed you, Michael. We were having fun.
Welcome to Verizon Wireless. Your call cannot be completed.
No kidding. It can't be completed. It's done. Let's see how. There we go.
We're sorry, the number you reached is not in service. Please check the number and dial again.
That is odd. Michael, if you're still listening to me, you can give me a call back. It's 800-699-0980. I don't know what happened to you. I was talking and then we got hung up upon, it seems. Kind of weird. And I'm getting this now that your numbers are not in service, which is what I had before. Kind of odd. Let me go ahead and let's see if I can do something else here. Oh, here we are. Let me see if I can get you this way. Ooh, that's loud.
The number you have dialed is invalid or
I will try it one more time, Mike, just to see what's going on here. I lost you. Phooey.
We're sorry, the number you have is in service. Please check the number and dial again. We're sorry, the number you reached is not in service.
See what we get here.
Ah, the joys of live radio.
I'm telling you, I was really on a rant there, having some fun, and you disappeared. I have no idea what happened, but it's good to have you back here. I think we were talking at the time about compromise or trying to find a way or something to go ahead and meet.
Well, I did. I did hear the question, and it did go dead. But again, we've been doing this for a while, so it's technology. But I guess the point that I was going to try to make, Michael, was the fact that here we are. We are, 2 years removed from the Obama-Biden era, and taking a look at how far the left has moved. Joe Biden is suddenly looking moderate. I mean. That's how far the pendulum has swung.
That's pretty funny that he's a moderate, because people who know him basically know that he's a whatever he needs to be.
Yeah.
He's like one of those type of political people that, pee in the wind, and the way the wind blows, that's what they believe in that moment. We had a guy like that in Florida. His name was Charlie Crist. Same way.
I'm familiar with him.
If I need to be a Democrat this year, all right, that's fine. Republican next year, that's fine. Whatever it takes. It really doesn't make much of a difference. Whatever it is, it is. So the presidential race will be interesting. I believe from listening to the debates, the obvious winner with the debates was Trump, because I can't imagine anyone getting elected from that crew. I certainly hope not. I think that would be a pretty quick demise of this country. But talking about presidents, I imagine there are a lot of myths in history about them as well.
Well, there certainly are. We talk in the book about people like Thomas Jefferson and, his bar tab. A lot of people don't realize that, he sold many of his books to help reshelve all the books at the Library of Congress. That money was used to actually pay off of his $900 bar tab. I mean, he ran up a $215,000 bar tab by today's standards. And he is just one of them. Most of them were just hyper partiers. And, it's so interesting. Calvin Coolidge was, a complete nut job. He used to actually wear a raccoon skin cap in the White House and ride a mechanical horse throughout the White House. Almost every single one of them had some kind of just weird idiosyncrasy. Adams had a dog by the name of Satan, for example, and the list goes on and on and on. George Washington, when he died, it was in his will, don't bury me for at least 3 days, because he was terrified of being buried alive. There was a lot of suspicion. A lot of people don't realize Barack Obama owns a pair of Muhammad Ali's boxing gloves, and it's so fascinating because almost every one of them have these idiosyncrasies that just never get reported.
Yeah, one of my favorites was LBJ, because he was kind of a nut job and a character to begin with. And there's a little known quote that's not really mentioned too much, but I'm sure you know that the Democratic Party has always been the party of hate. They've always been the party of hate. I believe they always will be the party of hate. And they were the party of slavery and segregation and all these terrible things that somehow now seem to be the Republicans' fault. Somehow now reparations, the most ridiculous thing I could ever imagine. From what I understand, there were a lot of white people, probably more than black people, that died during that war to go ahead and secure the end of slavery. So if anyone needs some money back, maybe I should be. My family was too busy running away from Cossacks, to have anything to do with slavery. But this whole notion that somehow people like Biden, for instance, people who kind of were brought up when they were brought up in the milieu in which they were brought up, and they were told that was right. If you're Paula Deen and you were born in the Deep South, there were certain things that went on, and that was just accepted. The fact that things have changed now doesn't make you now a horrific person. It doesn't make you a racist. It doesn't make you any of those things. So I think we get it wrong on many, many levels quite often. But again, I don't find anything that I can agree with on the Democratic side. I wish there was something, but there seems not to be anything there. No, go ahead.
It's very important to understand history, as far as the news cycle is concerned. For example, there's been a lot of talk about changing the complexity of the complexion rather of the Supreme Court and adding justices to the Supreme Court. FDR tried that. It was called the court packing plan, and it failed miserably. And if you don't see why or understand why it failed then, you won't understand why it's going to fail now. Almost every Democrat in power has tried to impeach every Republican president since the 1950s, and it goes on and on. And then you look at the reparations argument. I love talking about slavery and reparations. You know, a lot of people don't realize, according to the 1860 United States Census, 1.9% of Americans owned a slave during the slaveholding years. Not only did most people in America not own a slave, most people in America did not even know anyone that owned a slave, Michael. In addition to that, a lot of people don't realize that slaveholding was legalized by a black man in Virginia in the 1860s. His name was Anthony Johnson, who was a black man from Angola who brought an indentured servant over here. He ran away, and Anthony Johnson, the guy's name was John Casser. Anthony Johnson sues to have a Virginia court return John Casser to him and make him a slave for life. The court agreed. Slavery is legalized in the colonies at this point in time. Continues to stay legal in the United States. And although Thomas Jefferson would, in fact, outlaw the slave trade in 1807, but the point is the whole narrative behind reparations is 100% inaccurate.
You know, it's not surprising to me. You know, I mean, the whole thing to me is not only is it inaccurate, it's just the whole concept is rather stupid. You know, but Democrats don't seem to think long term. They never take an issue and kind of pan it out over a while. Things just change. I mean, like, people now are in such a quandary. We got to get Acosta now. He's the Secretary of Labor. He can't be in office. He gave that guy, Jeff Epstein, such a sweet deal down in Miami. How could he ever do that? How could that ever happen? Well, that's because Clinton was taking junkets with him to enjoy some 12-year-olds. And his wife at the time was still politically active. So the Democrats, you know, so the Democrats down there decided we'll give this guy a break because he's a member of the party, you know, the Democratic Party. He can go ahead and get away with a little bit more because of who he is in terms of his wealth and in terms of his political bent. And so people kind of have selectively very, very short memories nowadays also. So it's...
Well, this Jeffrey Epstein story is going to blow wide open. It's going to make Heidi Fleiss look like a choir girl. And people really need to pay attention to it. You know, people are comparing it to Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby, but then some author that has actually, his name is James Patterson, put out he wrote a book actually about how egregious this particular case is compared to all the rest of them that are out there. Because the Democrats, you know, they will lecture us and they will scream about tolerance, etc. But then at the same time, they are the party of pedophilia. They're the party of human trafficking. They're the party of slavery. They're the party of the KKK. The list goes on and on and on. How they have remained intact up to this point is befuddling to me. Because, Michael, and I'm just going to be, you know, I'm going to be completely honest about it. You have got to be one more complete fool, and I'm being kind in my language, but you've got to be a complete fool to vote for anybody running under the Democrat banner.
You know, I agree. I have like one set of relatives actually from New Jersey, and it seems that they've never really met a conservative ever before. And they have no idea how to speak about it, how to talk about it, or the fact that anyone would have anything different to think or say about it makes them nuts. You know, you said you don't know how anyone can actually vote for them or support them. Well, LBJ had mentioned something, and I know I was going to mention this before. I got sidetracked. Maybe we got popped off the air. I don't know. But he realized that shooting down black people with pressure hoses and lynching them in the South may not be a good thing for the Democrats anymore. And I'll have to paraphrase it because it does have the N word in it. But he says, I'm going to come up with a scheme, have them N people voting Democratic for the next 200 years.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
You know, one of my favorite quotes, because you can easily give a dog a bone and then you can take it away. And if you give them just enough to survive, they would depend on you. You know, sometimes things that just make sense are the most obvious and people don't see it. Like, well, look, Obama had both houses of Congress and he was the president. Did he do anything about immigration? Even though the Democrats at that time were for controlling things. Did that happen? No. Now, Trump had the two houses also for 2 years. Did anyone do anything about that, about immigration at that time, even though they could have? No. So what's the reason why that is? The reason to me is because they don't want it. No one wants it there. No one wants it there. The Republicans like some cheap labor, and the Democrats are trying to build their base so they can be in power forever. And so nothing gets done. I mean, sometimes I think the reason that nothing gets done is because it's lip service. You know, you have to say one thing to the public, and then you go ahead and you do what you want to go ahead and procure your own power and wealth. And I think that's what government is. Unfortunately, I have a very pessimistic attitude about it nowadays. I used to think that the people of the United States were somewhere on the list of what politicians would want to take care of. I don't even think we're on the list anymore. I don't think they give a goddamn about us, we the people. And it makes sense to me. I mean, if someone was sponsoring your show and gave you a couple of $1 million to get it together, do you think maybe you would do things for that person to help them out?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, duh. So, so where do you stand as an individual citizen? You don't stand at all. You just sit in the back. And the only thing you can do, the only thing that's kind of making you alive is the fact that they still need you to elect them. But they're working on getting rid of that too, I think. You know, I mean, let's get rid of the Electoral College. That's how it starts. Then it becomes,
Well,
popularity
I have
contest.
said this many times, and it's kind of what I call a semi-slogan of the program, and it's simply this. It's not a matter of left versus right. It's a matter of us versus them. And I think there's too many people in this country that believe the politicians have their best interest at heart. And interestingly enough, Michael, there's nobody in the Democrat Party that I know of that have benefited from anything from this party. And you mentioned a family member. One of my sisters actually worked for Loretta Lynch in the Department of Justice. The other one worked for the Veterans Administration as a doctor. So you can imagine what holidays are like at my home. But I have a sister that's a professor of psychology, and she contacted me one day, this is the one that works in the Veterans Administration, and told me that she had found this statistic that 97% of all men that carry guns or own a gun, 97% of them had a proclivity towards beating their wives. And when I asked her to cite her sources, and by the way, this conversation's going on social media. When I asked her to cite her sources, she can't. All of a sudden the thread disappears, and frankly, we haven't spoken since. This is one of my own siblings. They do everything from an emotional perspective. Logic be damned. Facts and truth be damned. They don't need reality. They just need to win the argument, and they're losing it more and more each passing day.
I have a sister-in-law who's like that. I mean, it's a touchy situation for me because my brother died 5 years ago yesterday, and from leukemia. And his wife has become progressively more. Can't even say liberal. I mean, nuts. I mean, she was one of the pussy hat people the day that Trump went into office, you know, and she can't make that connection that if you're running around Washington the day this guy is first coming in with a pussy hat on your head, there's something fucking wrong with you, you know? But she just doesn't see it. You know, hers is, you voted for him? You know, I'm glad I'm not alone, but I think I'm in this large club where we just don't understand what it is anymore that the Democrats actually want or stand for, other than the dissolvement of this country.
I don't think they know. You know, and you know what's funny is I've been in radio for so many years, and I know a lot of the players, all the pundits out there. And I have a friend of mine that is on Fox News pretty frequently by the name of Dr. Gina Loudon. She fills in for Hannity every once in a while. And, you know, Gina and I have kept up over the years. And she and I used to have all these arguments over the years that she was, when doing her radio program, she was always so desirous of wanting to convert liberals to conservative beliefs. And I'm like, sweetie, you can't do that. You know, our job as conservatives is to get conservative voters to the polling places and let the liberals just wallow in their own misery. Because they are, Michael, they are a miserable bunch. They're negative, they're stressed out, they come up with idiotic policies all the time. Every policy a Republican or conservative comes up with is detrimental. It's the end of the world. I mean, they don't have anything good to say about anybody, including in their own party. They don't value human life, whether it's the abortion issue or the human trafficking issue, which is going to come out in this Epstein case. They are, you know, when Hillary Clinton said basket of deplorables, oh, she knew what she was saying. She was just talking about her own people and trying to project it upon us.
That's interesting. So you think she was talking really about the deplorables are actually the liberals?
I think it was Freudian, but I think that, yes.
Wow. All right. That's interesting. I never heard that kind of concept before. You have to be kind of an idiot, though, to go ahead and kind of negate half of the United States when you're running for an election. Yeah. I don't know. So you're probably right. Maybe she was talking the deplorables of the people she has to, unfortunately, work with. Maybe that's why she always looked like she was sucking on a lemon and seemed nasty.
But isn't that true? Don't they all look like that? They got a cob so far up their rear orifice that they're going to explode at any single moment. You know, who the heck wants to be a Democrat? You got to be depressed and pissed off all the time.
That's the job. That's their job. I mean, media right now wakes up every day going, how can we get Trump? What negative thing can we say about Trump? And they get it wrong so many times, they really do, they do the other side a lot of service because they just become like real idiotic fools about everything. I remember them when Trump said, yeah, I'm being wiretapped. You remember that a couple of years ago? Oh, he's crazy. Oh, that was just nuts. Oh, Comey. Oh, he's the most reverent guy in the world. He can't do any wrong. He's, Mueller, the same thing. And they just kind of, I don't know. I hate to sound cliched, but it's like they drank the Kool-Aid. You know what I mean? And they just have these Democrat-tinted glasses on. And they have no idea really what's happening, I think, in the world, and no idea really how to proceed and do anything properly. It's very, very sad. You know, like the real news right now, we should be talking about Europe and Iran. How's Europe going to go ahead and respond to Iran? My feeling is it's just going to be lip service because they're kind of like, they remind me of the way the Obama administration would have handled things. You know, whoa, don't cross this line and I'll give you $500 billion in unmarked bills and cash. You know, maybe that'll,
That's right.
Calm them down or something like that. Who gives cash? Why do you give cash? Why does anyone ever give cash? I mean, I know you understand what I'm talking about, but I don't get it. I don't know how. I can understand how kids can think this strangely, because there's no such thing as education really anymore. But I can't understand how my sister-in-law would think that way. You know, it's befuddling to me. I know when I read some of the press stuff that I was sent that you were talking about presidents, you said that in actuality there has been a female president. My feeling is that Trump should just come out one day onto the, maybe in the Rose Garden would be a nice place for this, and proclaim that he no longer really believes he's a man, that he actually thinks that he's a woman. And he wants to be treated as part of the LGBTQRSTLMNOP society, and therefore we would have our first female president. But I think you actually know that there has been, for a limited amount of time, a female president?
Yeah, there's been an operational president. It was Edith Wilson. She was the first lady under Woodrow Wilson's second wife. Actually, he had a stroke. He was completely incapacitated, and for 18 or 19 months, she conducted the country's business, dealt with all the cabinet members. Nobody could see the president. She would sign his signature, do a signature, forge his signature, if you will, on certain documents. It's not really known how much foreign policy decisions she might have engaged in. But what we do know is during that 18-month period of time, nobody got to Woodrow Wilson while Edith Wilson was in charge. And although I only go so deep on this story in the book Unknown America, there are a couple different books written that have referred to her as Madam President, and she was referred to by cabinet members at that point in time as Mrs. President.
That's pretty crazy. That's interesting. You had mentioned also that there was a gay president, so it looks like we've covered all the grounds here already.
Yeah, there has. It was the one that preceded Abraham Lincoln. It was James Buchanan. Buchanan never got married. Matter of fact, at this period of time, we didn't have a first lady. We had a first hostess who was his niece. And presumably, Buchanan was actually involved with a senator, ironically enough, from the state of Alabama by the name of William King. And upon the deathbed confessions of Buchanan, he asked his family members to burn all of his personal effects, but apparently they kept several letters between him and a few other associates that he had at the time about William R. King and their breakup. And how did he put it? He went wooing other gentlemen, but could find no proper suitors. And so there was a lot of debate as to the extent of that relationship. But Andrew Jackson actually referred to the two as Aunt Fancy and Miss Nancy, and all of these things are in fact documented.
That's pretty crazy. That's pretty crazy. Wow. How long did it take you to write the book?
The problem with the book was it took about 5 years to write it. And although that sounds like it's this comprehensive, Leo Tolstoy kind of tome, the book's only about 225 pages long. The problem is there's so much in the book that flies counter to what we believe or what we've been taught. It was the researching and the verification of what I was printing that slowed me down. Mm-hmm. Now, I am just now in the process of publishing Unknown America for Kids, which is kind of a softened version of this book and gets into some of the less adult theme stuff that's contained in this one. But I've already got the notes for Unknown America 2, 3, and 4 sitting on my desk right in front of me, because it wasn't a matter of finding the information. It was a matter of verifying it and deciding what was going to make the cut, because there's so much of it. But to answer your question, it took about 5 years to write it and research it and verify it.
All right, so I had a little bit of oomph behind all of that. I noticed that on the reviews that were posted, first of all, you didn't get a bad review anywhere. All the reviews were absolutely positive. And the one that was my favorite is, you see, I worry about my grandchildren, and I worry about them with all sorts of stuff, but I'm mostly concerned with how they'll be educated in the future. And so I think books like that are a little bit more geared towards children may actually do quite well, because I don't see any of these kids getting an education. I mean, if Ocasio-Cortez is a exemplary example of an economics major out of the University of Boston, then God help us. I mean, that's I listen to her, and that's another one who never looks happy, always looks sad. I just wish she'd shut the hell up and have a latte or something. It's
well, you kind of touched on it, Michael. The whole thing about the book, and I even mentioned this in the closing remarks of the book, it's history. I just compiled it. I gave my viewpoints on it, researched and verified it. But at the end of the day, history writes itself. The main reason, and I started calling this the Unknown America Project, the main reason I did it was I'm hoping that it inspires other people to not take at face value what they read in our history books. A lot of people don't realize that American history books, for the most part, they're textbooks, are actually authored, written, and printed in Europe. And they have a very European slant to them. This is an easy read. It's 2 or 3 paragraphs per entry. It just kind of gets people's juices turning. I read about Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood, and I'm hoping people will take that as a cue to do a little further research and get a little bit deeper into it, because the narrative we're taught in this country is incorrect, but also it demonstrates the fact that the media, and again, it's not necessarily because they're complicit, it's really because they're incompetent. They craft the narrative that is just not true. So there's some fun stuff in it. There's some stuff that's not going to change your life. There's some interesting tidbits and just weird oddities and trivia, as I point out in the title of the book. But people in a larger sense need to realize that our kids are being lied to, and I'm hoping this book demonstrates that and will awaken parents and grandparents to the reality that if they want their children to succeed in the future, they have got to understand the history of this nation.
Yeah, it would be a good thing to do. Look, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. even amidst all of my kind of technical issues here and being hung up upon and things like that. I want to thank you very, very much for joining me this evening. Hopefully we can do this again. I'll get this equipment up. I may have to have someone come in here and check a couple of things that are not functioning exactly how I want. Your studio looked pretty slick. So you've been doing this, and it looks like everything's pretty honed down. I just switched up some things. It's always the communication between guests is always the problem. I'm doing this right now through a Bluetooth device, which sounds pretty good. I really wanted to do it digitally, but it wouldn't let me call you up. And it gave me that kind of nonsense. I don't know if you were hearing that, where your numbers aren't valid and this and that and the other thing. But when I get this all together again and I can actually see your face, I do have an image of you up here with a header underneath it. So it's kind of like the news in a way. But I want to thank you so much for joining me this evening. And I hope we can do this again, next time around.